Different metals are often baked into mythology. Look at griffins and dragons with their hoard of gold, or Bellerophon's use of molten lead to kill the chimera. And according to legend, people paid for their passage to the underworld with metal coins placed over their eyes. But how do different metals actually turn up in folklore? Why is iron such a protective metal while silver has a whole range of uses? And how has copper become so useful to modern medicine? So we're going to have a look at the ways ordinary people used gold, silver, iron and copper through superstitions and folklore in this week's episode of Fabulous Folklore. Hello there and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult and just a bit weird. I'm your host Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. Well, hello there and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore with me, your host Icy Sedgwick. We are kicking off a brand new month here and we are going to be doing a folklore of different types of materials kind of theme. So it's a bit like when we did the folklore of drinks and we looked at a different drink every week. That's essentially what we're going to be doing here. And we're starting off with metal because this was actually a request from a listener who wanted to know about the folklore of things like gold and silver and so on. So I've put all the metal ones into the one post. Now I will point out that we're not covering alchemy because obviously I have covered that before. So I will put the link for the alchemy episode in the show notes as well. But without any further ado, we might as well get started. And we are going to kick off with gold because it is, of course, the most valuable of the metals that I have included here. Now, gold is often associated with the sun, and it's also the material of choice for the 50th wedding anniversary. Now, as you might imagine, with a material like gold, it does have some impact on whether people felt that it was actually good luck or not, and shipwrights could actually use gold during the building process of making a ship in order to affect the look of the vessel. And what they would do is they would put a gold coin into the framework and a silver coin under the mast. And there was also a belief that a sailor couldn't drown if he wore a gold earring. I have of course also heard that the idea of wearing a gold earring was that you at least then had some form of currency on you to pay for a funeral. So there are different reasons attached to why you would want to have a gold earring. Rubbing your eyelids with gold was supposed to bring good luck, and some people actually thought that rubbing a sore eye with a gold ring would actually cure the problem. I do of course have to wonder if applying gold eyeshadow has the same effect or if it needs to be the metal itself. But there's also quite an interesting gold-related legend that explains why we hang stockings at the hearth at Christmas. And according to this story, St. Nicholas had learned that there were 3 beautiful sisters, but the problem was they were too poor and no man would marry them because they didn't have any money to bring to the marriage. They still needed to support themselves somehow, so they were then forced to turn to sex work. He felt so bad about this that he then threw 3 pieces of gold through the smoke hole in their roof. And these pieces of gold quite helpfully landed in their stockings that were hanging before the fire to dry, and thus they then had enough money in order to have a dowry so a man would pay them. And that is apparently why we hang stockings at Christmas. Again, I'm not sure how much I believe that, but there we go, that's the story. Now, surprisingly, even though gold has these different things attached to it around it being good luck, dreaming of gold was apparently a bad omen, although if you were dreaming that you were paying someone with gold, it meant that you would welcome new friends into your life. I dare say having gold would probably make you seem quite attractive to other people, but these of course dream omens, and dream omens are a strange topic in and of themselves. Dreaming of gold coins was actually a sign that you were in distress, while silver coins meant you were worried and copper coins meant loss, so do bear that in mind. And also, doctors once carried gold-headed canes, which were supposed to guard them against infection. Now, I do want to point out, of course, that there are some metals that do have antibacterial properties, but we're going to come back to them later on in the episode. And I was wondering about whether or not I should include the concept of fairy gold, but I did actually cover that once before when we looked at money folklore. So if you are interested in hearing a little bit more about fairy gold, then I have put the link for that in the show notes below. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, there should be a little link that just pops up on this video. Now we're going to move on from gold to silver. And silver is the metal associated with the moon, and it's also the material of choice for the 25th wedding anniversary. Now, it's probably most associated with being the best method to dispatch werewolves, although I did find that apparently you don't always need to shoot a werewolf to dispatch them. Apparently, if you knew their human name, you could simply call it 3 times while they were in wolf form, and this would essentially cure them of lycanthropy. But you did have to make sure that you got it right, because otherwise you would find yourself turned into a wolf, which would be a bit rubbish. And obviously we've got the links between silver and weddings. Like I say, it's the material for the 25th wedding anniversary, but also brides might actually have silver horseshoes sewn into their wedding dresses, and sometimes brides would actually give flower girls silver coloured horseshoes for luck as they left the church. So there is this lovely little link there. But perhaps one of the most common ways that people use silver is through coins. And an easy way to provide a good luck wedding day memento was to push a silver coin into a champagne cork. And indeed, a bride might actually put a silver coin into her shoe for luck on the big day. And then, of course, we've got the custom of the coin in the Christmas pudding. So whoever found the silver sixpence in their piece would enjoy luck and wealth in the coming year. I should point out, of course, in our family we do use a silver coin, which to be fair is usually only 20p, but it's the symbolism that counts to our family first footing tradition, and this helps us to bring wealth into the home on the 1st of January. But elsewhere, silver coins become either lucky, protective or curative. And in Britain we do have the custom of giving a new baby a silver coin. Now, one reason is to bring prosperity into their future, but I've also heard other people do so because the coin apparently keeps the devil away. And there is a slightly expanded custom in Northumberland. When a baby first visited a house, the owner should give the child a silver coin, suet and an egg, and this meant that the child would never want for food and money. But in the Ozarks in America, people actually turned silver coins into rings because they believed it was good luck to touch a silver coin when the new moon appeared. And obviously an easy way to make sure that you had one with you was to have it as a ring, and then you could just wear it. And obviously we can't talk about silver coins without mentioning the tooth fairy, and the tooth fairy traditionally left silver coins in exchange for baby teeth for children. I've never quite figured out what the tooth fairy actually does with all the baby teeth, but there we go. Now, rings made from silver coins also had a healing aspect as well as a good luck one, and people would essentially beg a penny from 12 unmarried people of the opposite gender, and they would then exchange that money for sacrament money, which is basically the silver coins left in the church collection. So you would essentially be collecting 12 pennies in order to exchange that for one of the shillings left in the church collection, and then silversmiths could then turn those shillings into a ring that would apparently cure fits. Now, cramp rings could also be made from metal stolen from old graves, and these would apparently ward off cramp, and people preferred silver, but they might actually use any metal that had been used to make coffins. In the Ozarks, people used silver coins to ease teething pains, and they would hang these on strings around their children's neck. If you thought a person or cattle had been affected by the evil eye, then silver could actually help you detect if they had been, and you should, and I quote, draw water between sunset and sunrise from a stream crossing a public road which has been passed over by the living and the dead. Put a piece of silver in the water and pour it over the person or animal you desire to cure in the name of the Trinity. If the sickness has been caused by the evil eye, the silver will stick to the bottom of the vessel, end quote. Now that is from 1897, and it is also a little bit involved because I'm not sure how many times you'd find public roads that had been passed over by both the living and the dead, which also had streams crossing them, but there we go, that is what that particular belief said. Now, there is a possibility that people specify silver because of the metal's perceived properties, because as I say, look at silver defeating both werewolves and witches, but in Georgia, silver could also be used to dispatch ghosts, and a superstition from 1894 recommended turning silver quarter dollars into bullets, and if you shot a ghost with one, this would apparently kill it. I'm not quite sure how you kill a ghost, but there we go. Although I should point out that silver still wasn't as effective as iron for dispatching supernatural threats. And iron as a metal was associated with Mars, both astrologically and in terms of the god. And in ancient Rome, wedding rings were actually often made from iron as well. Obviously, it was a little bit later that gold rings became commonplace. Iron is surprisingly the material of choice for the 6th wedding anniversary, and steel, which is obviously a processed form of iron, is the material for the 11th anniversary. If a woman wanted to find a compliant husband, what she needed to do is find old iron nails and then have them turned into a ring on a Friday during Mass. She would need to say the Gospels on it every day and say a paternoster. And once she'd worn it on her finger, she would then find a husband who would do anything that she asked for a year. But I think iron's probably more famous as the anti-fairy metal of choice in folklore. And please don't do this, but parents might hang an open pair of iron scissors over a cot to deter fairy theft, or they might stick an iron pin into the baby's clothes. In Northumberland, people actually put garlic bread and steel in the cradle to stop fairies from stealing their babies. That one seems a little bit better because at least you're just putting something in the cradle, and steel is, as I say, another form of iron. But that's also a fantastic choice because garlic is also a plant associated with Mars. So for some reason, Mars really doesn't like fairies. Some people in Scotland would put a piece of cold iron into the bed before a woman gave birth because not only did it keep the fairies away, it should also ensure a safe and easy birth as well. Now, the metal didn't just ward off fairies because people also wore iron bracelets in bed to protect themselves from visits by succubi or incubi. Now, ultimately, any implements made of iron provided protection to the home, but especially the sickle. And this protected a home from being struck by lightning. You should store it by the chimney with the tip pointing upwards. And also, if your house had an iron fence, you would enjoy good luck for as long as the fence remained standing. In the Ozarks, if people found iron horseshoes when they were just out and about, they would spit on the horseshoe and throw it over their left shoulder to bring good fortune. Alternatively, you could also hang it in a tree to contain all the bad luck, and then if anyone came along and touched the horseshoe, they would get all the bad luck of whoever had hung it up. People in that area also used iron nails to ward off evil, and they would drive 3 nails in the shape of a triangle into the door, and this would apparently keep away witches. And likewise, putting a new horseshoe in the bottom of a butter churn stopped it from being bewitched. Iron also had other protective qualities as well. You could make sure that your dress wore well by keeping a piece of iron in the pocket. And meanwhile, putting a cold iron bar over a beer barrel would stop the beer from turning sour during a thunderstorm. And if we're going to look at the metal for Mars, which as I say is iron, then we have to have a look at the metal for Venus, which is copper. And copper or bronze marks the 7th wedding anniversary, and copper alone is the 22nd anniversary material. In the Ozarks, people wore copper rings or carried copper beside the skin to treat rheumatism, and copper wire around the ankles was particularly popular, which actually led locals to cut off lengths of telegraph wire. And even now, people might wear either a magnetic or copper bracelets to ease the pain of arthritis. There are other conditions that people wear these bracelets for as well, and unfortunately, research has shown that if they do work, it's purely due to the placebo effect. Now, I'm of a mind where if something does work, even because it is just a placebo, is that necessarily a bad thing? But I would probably say it's the kind of treatment to try alongside more conventional treatments as well. But incidentally, copper is an amazing metal if you want an antibacterial surface, and the ancients actually knew about this, with the Egyptians using copper to sterilise wounds and drinking water, and medical settings have finally taken an interest in it, because obviously if you think about somewhere like a hospital, if you have a metal which bacteria just die on, then that obviously makes life a lot easier because it means that you can keep things sterile more easily. And indeed, even the Victorians used copper bed frames in hospitals because of this antibacterial nature of copper. And I think that just the nature of copper to get rid of things possibly explains why there was a belief that you could get rid of pests in the house by beating copper pans in every room on the last day of February. And you would shout, "Out with you, scorpions, serpents, fleas, bugs and flies," as you did so. And then you would carry this pan outside, holding it with a pair of tongs, and all the pests would quite obligingly go into the pan. And also, copper is quite an interesting metal because it does change colour. So copper does turn a greenish blue when it oxidises, which is why you often see buildings with what should have been a copper cupola, but then it's gone green or blue and things like that. And people actually thought at one point that using copper needles to pierce cheese was what created the blue veins in blue vein cheese. And it was only when people then switched to stainless steel needles, and it still kept happening, that they realised it wasn't actually due to the copper. Copper, I must admit, is one of my favourite materials, and it is quite easy to work with if you make jewellery and so on. So I've got quite a lot of love for copper. But ultimately, what do we make of the folklore of metals? Well, we've only been able to cover 4 metals here, and I think it is quite notable that there does seem so much about silver and iron in particular. probably because I'm guessing they may have been more accessible, whereas gold in particular, there's a bit less attached to it, again, due to its value, and copper just possibly wasn't something that people thought of. Now, other metals such as tin or lead do have their own folklore as well, but metals in general are actually a lot like plants. They can be both beneficial and toxic to humans. So quicksilver, otherwise known as mercury, is incredibly toxic, whereas the body actually needs copper to make red blood cells, maintain your immune system, and form collagen. Magnesium is another metal that your body does actually need as well. So it is quite interesting that we do have this same dichotomy between good and bad for metals in the same way that we do plants. Now, there's also a degree of human activity imprinted upon metal as well, because once we encounter metal, it's usually been processed beyond the ore that was originally found in the ground. And I think in some ways this has actually given humanity a much closer relationship with metal because we've learned to work and shape it. And I think there's probably no wonder why blacksmiths were once revered so much. And indeed we have actual blacksmith gods like Hephaestus and Vulcan and so on as well. But it would be quite a good idea to have a look among your jewellery collection and see which metals are represented, and then maybe you can see them in a new light. So I hope that you enjoyed that sort of tour of metal. Next week we're going to be having a look at stone. Now, I'm not going to be going into like what aquamarine or ruby means because there's reasons for that, but we're going to be having a look at how people use stones for protection or in folk medicine and things like that. So I hope that you enjoyed that episode as well. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I do just quickly want to do a little shout out that if you are in the Newcastle area on the 11th of August, I am actually doing a talk at Newcastle Cathedral about the vampire rabbit. We're going to be having a look at why he's there. Also, why are there seahorses all around Newcastle? Because you find them on so many different buildings. And also we're going to be having a look at the River God Tyne as part of the Newcastle Oddities talk. So that starts at 6:30 at Newcastle Cathedral. So if you are interested, I have put the booking link for tickets in the show notes below, and it would be lovely to see you there. I am doing another talk on the 25th at the same time, and we're going to be having a look at cathedral creatures. So this is based on the creatures and mythical beasts that you can find in and around the church on carvings and in stained glass windows. So because there's so many of them, we will be focusing on dragons, wyverns and griffins. So again, it would be lovely to see you there if you're around, and I will put the link in the show notes for that as well. But without any further ado, I will see you next week. Cheerio. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps other people find the show too. It also takes between 4 and 6 hours to research, write, record and edit these episodes, so if you want to help support my time in doing that, then you can buy me a coffee. Or you can join the Fabulous Folklore family on Patreon and enjoy extra benefits, including exclusive episodes and articles and even illustrated talks. All the links you need are below, and thanks in advance.